morning. It is a pleasure to be with you this morning. This is my second time in your annual conference. The last time was maybe 2005 or 6 at Soul Fiesta, hosted by Gold Canyon. Was anyone there? Yes, I was there with my colleague Sienna Rouse, and we led a pilgrimage that week. So it is a delight to be back with you. I want to thank Rachel Gilmore for extending the invitation to be with you today. The first time that Rachel and I met, we were like, we are going to do a lot of great things together. And the Spirit has been wonderful in finding ways for us to come together for things like this. And Bishop Carlo, thank you for hosting me. I think your vision is both practical and inspirational and timely. So thank you very much for your leadership. As they say in Malawi, where I served as a volunteer in mission for 2 years, all protocols have been observed. So let us begin. This session and this annual conference this year is about letting it begin with you. And that's exactly where we're going to start. So I would like to invite you now, if you have your phones out, finish your last text. Oh, I got some of you. Okay. If you're writing an email, finish the sentence. If you're making lists for what happens after this, I invite you to pause. If you're worried about the long list of things we have heard there are to worry about, I invite you maybe just to let those fall at your feet, because I promise they'll be there when we come back to them. And I'm going to invite you to do a body scan, to check in with yourself, fully present in this moment. I forgot that I have this. This is a chance for you to check in body, mind, and soul. So I want to invite you to find a comfortable way to sit. This is a way that you are relaxed but also alert. If your feet reach the floor, sometimes mine don't. Maybe your feet are resting firmly on the floor. Notice if you tend to collapse forward or just collapse back, and just sit upright. If it feels safe to you in a group of people, I invite you to close your eyes. If that does not feel safe, you can gaze at the candle on the screen, or gaze here at the altar, or just rest your eyes on something at your table. If you feel drowsy, I invite you to sit with your palms up, open to the Spirit. If you've already had your Starbucks and lots of caffeine this morning, place your hands palms down in your lap to ground you. Now breathe in deeply through your nose and exhale slowly out your mouth. Breathe in deeply through your nose, filling your body and expanding. And then exhale slowly, releasing every bit of air and softening your shoulders. One more time, breathing in the biggest breath that you have taken all day. And then exhaling slowly, fully present and relaxed in this moment. Now bring your attention to the top of your head. Don't forget to keep breathing. And just notice how you feel. With your next inhale, soften the muscles in your face. Let your tongue drop heavy in your mouth. And as you exhale, let your shoulders sink away from your ears. Feel your arms heavy, relaxed. Notice your hands, maybe stretch out and wiggle your fingers. Now breathe right into the center of your chest. As you inhale, feel your heart expand, even just a little. Notice if your shoulders are rounded or if they've risen back towards your ears, and relax as you exhale. On your inhale, see if you can soften your belly. Exhale and feel yourself fully supported in your chair. Notice the length and the strength of your legs. Are they restless or still? And then move your attention all the way down to your toes, maybe wiggling them in your shoes. Take another deep breath and notice where you feel at ease. Where are you tense? As you exhale, receive the permission to accept it all just as it is. Breathe in the Spirit and send love to those parts of your body that are sore, that are weary, that are anxious. And as you exhale, imagine releasing those very same feelings. Inhale and exhale. And when you're ready, come back into this room, present, maybe shaking your head yes and no, opening your eyes if they were closed. Let it begin with me. Where are you beginning today? Take just a moment and with a word or a phrase, I am calm. I am anxious. I am hopeful. Where is it that you, in your very specific circumstances, begin today? I'm so curious to know what it feels like to pay attention to yourself. To begin by checking in with your very physical body. For some of you, I imagine this feels quite natural and even welcome. For some of you, it may feel very uncomfortable, maybe even selfish. But I invite you to be curious about your reaction to spending 5 minutes checking in with yourself. Almost exactly a year ago, I had to begin again with me. I unexpectedly lost a job that I had poured my whole self into. A job where, if I'm honest, I had also lost myself. I was exhausted, I was ashamed, I was angry, and I was scared having lost my job, in the midst of a world that is also exhausted, ashamed, angry, and scared. But there was also this very real and pulsing part of me that was relieved. And I was curious about that. I spent a good part of last year paying attention to what I felt in my body and my mind and my spirit, and searching for the practices that would help me sustain faith in a vulnerable world. The world that we just prayed for this morning. And in that exploration, I was able to start coming back to myself, to the way that God had created and made me to move in the world. So let me begin with a story. My first spiritual director was Bishop Reuben Job. Yeah, I know. As a 26-year-old youth pastor, Bishop Job's grandchildren were in my youth group. So to me, he was a grandpa. That's how I got to know him. But he saw that I was struggling, carrying the burdens of all of these teenagers, and even more so their parents. And so sitting with Bishop Job, he suggested that there was a way to pray without words. And so he told me about when he and his wife took their first child home from the hospital. And he said could remember so clearly handing the baby to his wife in the front seat. There weren't car seats. He handed his baby to his wife in the front seat and got in the car to make that treacherous drive home from the hospital. But he said that became his image for prayer when he didn't know how to pray. The love that he saw in his wife's eyes holding that baby. So I tried it. And you know what? It didn't work for me. Because I'm a mother, but it wasn't my image. So that summer, I took the youth group to Heifer Ranch in Arkansas. Has anyone been to Heifer Ranch? Yeah. So each day, the youth and the leaders are assigned different tasks on the ranch. And our first task was to rescue a flock of baby chicks who had been caught in a rainstorm. And we took them to a heat lamp, and we were given towels and hair dryers, and we rubbed them so gently and blow dried them, and then we just left them under the lamp because there was more to do on the farm. And we came back several hours later, and these chicks were just sunning themselves, and their feathers were dry, and they were chirping and moving around. And that became my image. To this day, as Bishop Carlo was asking us to pray this morning, that's the image that came to mind. How do I hold these folks without words, with sighs too deep for words? So to give you those two images to say, I'm going to share with you this morning my 4 practices for sustaining faith in a vulnerable world. And they may not work for you. But what I hope they do is make you curious and committed to finding those practices that are right for you. As I traveled through my own dark night of the soul last year, I reflected and I listened and I prayed, and I came to know deep in my being 4 practices that are vital to sustaining my faith in a vulnerable world. Knowing my belovedness, listening deeply to my own wisdom and the wisdom of God, choosing joy, and metabolizing trauma. In order for me to bring my full self to the world without losing it, these are the practices that sustain me. Beloved. In 2009, my husband and I moved with our children, ages 3 and 9 at the time, to Malawi, a small landlocked country in southern Africa, and we served as the first volunteers in mission in the Provisional Annual Conference, that is the United Methodist Church in Malawi. Now, those 2 years are an entirely different conversation, and I would love to come back and talk to you about it. But when we returned in 2011, I experienced my first clinical depression. I found that even though I had preached and taught and taught and convinced others of their belovedness, I did not believe it for myself. When I came back to Nashville, I didn't have a job. I didn't have any tasks or accomplishments to point to. The daily struggle and challenges and crisis of the missionary work were not there. It was just me, Kara. And I had to find again for myself my identity as beloved. My husband gently, after a few months, asked if maybe I needed to see a therapist. And that's also the year I discovered yoga. It's when I began to know for the first time at nearly 40 years old that I am beloved. That the words that Jesus heard, "You are my son, the beloved, and with you I am well pleased," that those were true for me as well. Regardless of what I did or didn't do, regardless of where I succeeded or I failed, I was beloved of God. In the midst of the depression, the healing had to begin with me. And I heard those words as a blessing and a truth. But friends, I tend to forget things. So I had these butterflies tattooed on my wrist. Because in that darkness of depression, everything dissolved and was reformed. And I didn't ever want to forget the beautiful reminder and learning of that time that I am beloved. And for me, the practice that helps me revisit that belovedness is centering prayer. And so I'm going to invite you to participate in that with me. In the past year, feeling vulnerable in a vulnerable world, I had to return to knowing from 15 years ago. The practice of centering prayer simply is on the inhale, you use the name for God that is most meaningful to you, most intimate. And on the exhale is your deepest desire. I know some folks whose breath prayer, I said centering prayer, breath prayer. I know some folks whose breath prayer has remained consistent for decades. For me, my breath prayer changes every day. I have seen breath prayer used in hospice, where the dying person can share their breath prayer with their family members, and they can breathe and pray together the same prayer until their dying breath. So I want to invite you, just for 1 minute, to pray together. You may already have a breath prayer that's meaningful to you, and I invite you to revisit that. But if you don't, take a moment what is the name for God that is most intimate, most meaningful for you? Comforter? Friend? And what is your deepest desire today? If it begins with you, what is your deepest desire? Your breath prayer may be comforter, ease my grief. Inhaling, Jesus. Exhaling, heal me. Almighty God, bring justice. So we're going to practice, we're going to pray together for just 1 minute. I'll ring the bell and bring you out of the silence in 1 minute. Let us pray. So again, to notice, what does silence feel like for you? Do you know your deepest desire? How does it impact your body, your mind, and your soul just to pray for that 1 minute? The second practice for me to sustain faith in a vulnerable world is listening deeply. Prior to the pandemic, in one of those years back then, a group of women at my local church came to me and asked if I would facilitate centering prayer for Lent. Honestly, part of their motivation is that they were experiencing some symptoms they didn't like as they entered menopause, and they were looking for clarity and relief. They began with them, right? They're very real circumstances, and they had heard that meditation and prayer might help. And so we began. We gathered in a circle of chairs, much like the one you see in a Sunday school room at church. We would begin with just 10 minutes of silence together, using a sacred word when our minds would wander. I would break into the silence in those first weeks with gentle reminders to come back to the present moment, to breathe. It's amazing how often we forget to breathe. Meeting weekly over the course of Lent, the silence stretched to 20 minutes. And by the time we got to Easter, we were sitting together in silence for 30 minutes. What we discovered together is that God was waiting for us there in the silence, that the swirling of our thoughts would actually slow down, that the tightness we felt in our chest would actually ease, that we felt the energy and the presence of God that's promised whenever two or more gather in God's name. My best guess is that we began that group in about 2018. And while I have moved away, it continued through the pandemic on Zoom and continues each week now in a hybrid gathering. That practice of stillness and silence and deep listening is vital to sustaining our faith in a vulnerable world. Where I work now at the Ayers Center for Spiritual Development, they have been hosting 8-day silent centering prayer retreats for over 30 years. The walls and the land of this retreat center are soaked with prayer. You can feel it. And one thing I've been learning is that centering prayer is a common 11-step practice for those in 12-step recovery. There's a significant overlap among the communities, including Celebrate Recovery. In a conversation with a small group just last week at one of these retreats, they were telling me about this connection between centering prayer and 12-step recovery. One person said, centering prayer is the gift that keeps giving. And another chimed in, unlike addiction, it's the gift that doesn't take anything away. Isn't that beautiful? I have found for me that a prolonged practice of centering prayer, it takes that deep and consistent silence for me to begin to hear God's voice. It takes practice for me to tune in and listen to the still, small voice of God. But the beautiful thing is that when I practice that in the silence, it becomes easier for me to hear God's voice in the chaos as well. When I'm faithful to deep listening, it can be Zen meditation. It can be mindfulness-based stress reduction. It can be centering prayer. Whatever it is, if I practice it regularly, I can more easily tap into my deep wisdom and the promptings of God in the midst of life. It's then that I can hear those promptings, those warnings as good Wesleyans. I can hear those standing in a grocery store line. I can hear those in conversations with my children. Practicing first enables me to live it differently in the world. So guess what? We're going to practice together. Let it begin with you. In classic centering prayer, you choose a sacred word that serves as your anchor. When your mind starts to wander, and it will, your sacred word brings you back. I've heard others teach centering prayer and say the moment that you catch yourself wandering and come back, that's centering prayer. When you catch it and come back to the presence of God. Friends, we're going to experiment with 3 minutes. For those of you who practice silence, this will go by in an instant. For those of you who do not, this is going to feel like an eternity. I am warning you now. But I am promising you, I will not forget you. You're going to think she forgot us. You're going to look up and see if I left the stage. I haven't. We're going to sit together in silence with God for 3 minutes. Meditation, traditionally, meditation is putting yourself before God. Contemplation is when God shows up and you recognize God. We're going to see if that can happen in 3 minutes. So choose a sacred word. It might be a name for God. It might be something that you need. It might be peace, joy, whatever it is. And then again, return to that seat Some people prefer to stand if you've got, a bad hip or bad knee or whatever. Find a comfortable way to rest and stay alert. And I'm going to ring the bell as we go into 3 minutes of silence with God. All right, show of hands who thought it was an eternity. Oh, there's only one brave soul who would admit it. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you. Too short. See, I have found my people. That's right. So be curious about how it feels to you. Is it calming? Does it produce anxiety? I led box breathing, another breath technique with our staff just last week, and we finished the box breathing exercise, and the woman said, "That one's not for me." She was like, I couldn't get the breathing right. I had a pain in my chest. I didn't like that one. Fair enough. Fair enough. But just to be curious about what you need to sustain your faith in a vulnerable world. Friends, the lovely woman in this picture is the Reverend Dr. Amy E. Steele, and she's sitting here today with me as well. And she gifted me with this tiara. She is teaching me how to choose joy. Last year, I turned 50, and I told my spiritual director that I wanted to have fun, but I didn't know how. So she suggested that I enlist a friend who knew how to have fun. And I knew who to go to. So I went to Amy, and we planned my 50th birthday party. It was going to be a come-and-go dinner at a friend's house with all my favorite people, and one of my kids showed up, my husband. And then Amy booked us a booth at a drag show. And I got to wear my tiara. Friends, this party was planned, and the excitement was building. And then she and I both lost our jobs the week before this picture was taken. I asked her if we were still going to have the party, and she said, absolutely. We chose joy. She showed me how to choose joy in the midst of a very vulnerable time. I put on heels, I wore my tiara, and I danced, and I celebrated every experience of my 50 years. And it kindled hope. And I felt a tangible healing in a very vulnerable place in my life and in the world. Friends, I'm a white, cis, Protestant, born in the Midwest, theologically trained, liberal, firstborn daughter. I'm an ISTJ and a 3 on the Enneagram. I don't know how to have fun. And so I have to lean on and trust people and learn from others who don't look like me, who weren't raised like me, who didn't grow up in the same culture as me. I need to learn from them about downtime and rest and joy because my default is stress and work and push through. And so it's not a coincidence that in my life, I want to get all this right. It is not a coincidence for me that it is the black women in my life who show up first to the party and who are most optimistic about my future. It is my Gen Z children who do not worship accomplishments and value their community of friends over everything else. It's my queer friends and family members who live boldly and insist on love. It's my colleagues in Malawi who know what it means to live with deep need and dance every Sunday at church. Choosing joy is a growing edge for me. And this year, it has meant walking barefoot more often than not. I mean, I work at a retreat center. It's getting up from my desk to go walk in the woods because I work on a beautiful mountain bluff. It's slowing down long enough to have a long talk with a guest who stops by my office instead of marking another thing off my to-do list. It's inviting Amy to Vegas with me to enjoy the pool so I don't take myself too seriously as the keynote speaker. Choosing joy. So now I'm going to find out what your growing edge is. Okay, I'm going to take off my shoes. If you want to, you can take off your shoes. If you have mobility issues, don't take off your shoes. All right. In my yoga practice, I learned the breath of joy. And I'm going to invite you to try it with me now. You're going to need some room. You're going to be swinging your arms. Now, I do seriously, though, want to say a word about mobility. If you've had a shoulder surgery, if you're not able to stand, please be mindful of what your own physical limitations are. But you're going to stand up. Okay, I've got this lavalier mic for this reason exactly. It's going to be 3 in-breaths before you exhale, okay? So the first in-breath, your arms will go out in front of you. The second in-breath, your arms will go out to the side. This makes me so happy. Okay, the third in-breath, your arms go all the way up overhead, and then on the exhale, it's a loud exhale as you bend over. Oh, this is so good. Okay. We're going to do it 6 times. And it's better if you smile. Okay. Ready? Here we go. So inhale, inhale, inhale. Good. Inhale, inhale, inhale. In. Good. This is 4. 5. 6. Oh, how you feel? All right, you can, do a little shimmy shake if you want, and then have a seat. Okay. So how do you feel? Okay, there we go. This will be good to remember, Bishop, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Yeah, exactly. So just notice how you feel before and how you feel after. Are there times and places where you can sneak in a breath of joy, close the door to your office, or don't? Maybe it's Thanksgiving with the family and you sneak into a spare bedroom. Maybe it's right after you get out of the car and you're going into a meeting that you don't know how it's going to go. But to choose joy. The last practice for me at this season in my life is metabolizing trauma. So I want you to take a moment and just soak in this image. It's one of a series of sculptures by Paige Bradley entitled Expansion. And I wonder what stands out to you. What's your immediate reaction? When I first saw this image, it was simultaneously a deep relief and a longing. Because in my most vulnerable moments, I tend to shut down, not open myself up. I tend to resist and fold in on myself and seal up all those cracks so that no one can see them. I resist the flow of energy and the promptings of the Spirit. But I know, deep within me is where the light resides. And I know that after any contraction in life, there is always an expansion. It's the natural rhythm of our life and our world. For every contraction, there's an equal and opposite expansion. There is movement and there is flow and there is energy for life. I told you earlier that I discovered therapy and yoga at the same time when I was experiencing depression. When I sat with my therapist and I told her about my day or an interaction, she would ask me, "How did you feel?" She would ask me about an emotion, and I did not understand her question. She would ask me again, "Well, I know, but when that happened, how did you feel?" And I could not name my feelings. I've been in some 12-step work. I found out this is not uncommon. So she gently tried a different approach. When you had that conversation, where did you feel it in your body? I said, "Oh, my chest was so tight." She said, "That might have been grief. Were you sad?" When she noticed that I was clenching my fists, she would ask, Are you feeling angry? She would often observe the 11s. Do you know these 11s? These marks here, a furrowed brow. Are you frustrated? My body knew my feelings before my brain. And I had to learn at nearly 40 years old how to name those feelings that my body was trying to give me clues to all along the way. I felt like a toddler learning my colors. Oh, that's sadness. That's fear. That's shame. And then I would go to yoga. And I would breathe in and I would exhale all the way. I would move my arms and my legs and I would twist and bend. And for the first 6 weeks of that practice, every time I laid on the mat at the end in Shavasana, or rest pose, tears would just stream down my face. Because in therapy, I was learning to name the grief and the fear and the trauma. And in yoga, I was literally releasing them from my body. Our white Western Christian tradition has too often denigrated or ignored the incredible wisdom and the value and the work that our bodies are doing for us. The ways that our bodies are contributing to our healing. Many years later, I was practicing yoga 3 or 4 times a week, and I broke my leg. Not doing yoga. I was on a trampoline. That's another story. But I broke my leg. My daughter was about 13 at the time, and she said, "What are we going to do if you can't do yoga?" She knew that the health of our family began with me being my healthiest self. Now, I haven't hidden yoga mats under all your chairs. I can't lead you in a full practice now. But another way that I have found to metabolize trauma is writing. It is an equally powerful tool for metabolizing the trauma, big or small, that lives in each of us. So to begin, I want to share a poem that I have written about metabolizing, and then I'm going to give you just a couple minutes to write on your own. Metabolize. I have held this grief so long, grasped in my hand, turning it over and over, plying it with pressure, stretching it, pulling it, enjoying the feel of it oozing and sticking in my fingers. I could feel the consistency change, feel this malleable dough become stiffer, brittle at the edges, more difficult to knead, until it was a rock, cold and heavy. I looked down to see this natural grief had become an unnatural fear, leaden, a burden, a shame I wanted to hide, but now permanently part of me. But caught in a shower of mercy, grace, my hand disfigured and cramped from clenching this stone relaxed. The rain softened it. Grace made it pliable again. Mercy released it from my grasp, and I ate it. I took this fear into me, tasted it, let it roll on my tongue, slide into my belly, salty as my tears, a slight tang, sweetness, a tart aftertaste. It metabolized in my body. Wisdom flowed in my veins. Nutrients of experience and patience fed me, and my miraculous soul filtered out the guilt, expelled the shame. My body grew stronger, my heart quickened, my muscles relaxed. Taking it in, transforming it and me with the power to live and move and have my being. I want you to take just a minute with pen and paper. And they've proven it's better with pen and paper than clickety-clack. To write, what is that thing that is lodged in you, that is stuck, that you need to metabolize through your body, mind, and soul? We'll just take 1 minute. Again, as you think about those griefs, traumas, challenges, questions that are very real for you, are there ways that those hinder you from contributing to healthy communities, to healthy churches, to a healthy world? And what are the next steps that will help you move that trauma, to heal that grief? Again, to be curious about these practices. So when I took the time to reflect and to pray about what it means for me to sustain my faith right where I was in my very specific circumstances, these are the 4 practices that I'm committing to in my life. Knowing my belovedness, listening deeply, choosing joy, metabolizing trauma. And I've written them down on a note in my phone with a reminder on the 28th of every month to revisit them. Am I doing that? How am I doing that? To check in with myself. I also have a covenant group that I have been meeting with for years who knows about my practices. And I meet regularly with a spiritual director who can challenge me and listen deeply with me. And I have several, but I have some key soul friends that I can reach out to at any time, who know my light and my dark, who know my ups and my downs, who I can say anything to. As I began writing today, and I had not even invited Amy to be with me yet, but I realized Amy was one of those people. We've gone to school together, we've worked together, we've led centering prayer together. We share and teach each other. We affirm each other's gifts. We show up for one another. Now, we don't talk, we don't even text, not even every week, not even every, surely we don't go a month. But one of those people, it doesn't matter. You can reach out and they will reach back. A soul friend. We cannot sustain life in this vulnerable world alone. So I want to invite you to connect with a soul friend who you can be absolutely vulnerable with, who can help you and travel with you in this very vulnerable world. We have just a few minutes left. And so in the spirit of Wesleyan conferencing, I want to give you time to talk to one other person now, just for a couple of minutes for each of you. Where do you begin? Just in this hour, is there a glimmer? Is there an insight? Is there a prompting? What has challenged you? What are you curious about? So find a partner. Okay? Or 3 if you need. And I'm going to ring the bell in about a minute so that each person has a chance to talk, okay? Okay, just make sure the second person gets to talk as well. Go ahead and finish up your thought. And as we close this session together, we're going to use our bodies again. So if you're comfortable, you can stand with me. We're going to do a body prayer. We're going to pray the prayer 3 times. The first time I will say the words, and you can follow along with the motions. The second time we will pray together and move our bodies together. You'll catch on quickly. And the third time we'll just do the movements and no words. So let us pray. Let it begin with me. God, be in my head and in my understanding. God, be in my eyes and in my seeing. God, be in my ears and in my hearing. God, be in my mouth and in my speaking. God, be in my heart and in my loving. God, be in my hands and in my serving. God, be in my legs and in my moving. God, be in my life and in my living. Now say the words with me. God, let it begin with me. God, be in my head and in my understanding. God, be in my eyes and in my seeing. God, be in my ears and in my hearing. God, be in my mouth and in my speaking. God, be in my heart and in my loving. God, be in my hands and in my serving. God, be in my legs and in my moving. God, be in my life and in my living. And now in silence. And all God's people said, Amen. Amen. Thank you.